For centuries, Freemasonry has been shrouded in all this mystery, a secret society full of weird handshakes and symbols, right? Well, at its core, it's something else entirely. It's really a structured, symbolic journey of self-improvement. Today, we're going to go inside that journey, using an actual Masonic ritual manual to understand how it all gets started. So let's pull back the curtain and take a look at the very first steps on this path to self-knowledge.
Right off the bat, the manual makes it clear. This is not your average social club. From the very beginning, it's framed as a lifelong battle. And that's a really powerful way to think about it, isn't it? Self-improvement isn't something you just do. It's an active struggle. The manual says that to build a better you first have to become a warrior, fighting against not just the world's corruption, but your own internal flaws, what they call the passions.
And this brings us to the absolute central metaphor for the entire process. Every single person, before they start, is seen as a rough ashlar, basically a rough, uncut stone. It's a pretty humbling idea when you think about it. We all start as raw material, full of potential, sure, but also loaded with flaws. The whole point of Masonry, then, is to give you the philosophical tools you need to chip away at your own imperfections, to shape yourself into something more virtuous, more enlightened. Okay, so how does this transformation actually happen? How do you get from being a rough stone to something more? Well, we're going to follow the path of a candidate who's called a profano as he takes his very first steps. And this isn't just a random series of events. It's like a carefully crafted piece of theater where every single step, every object, every word is just packed with meaning.
Now that word, profane, it probably sounds a little harsh, right? But in this context, it has a very specific, very literal meaning. It actually comes from Latin, profanum, which just means before the temple. So it's not an insult. It simply means someone who isn't initiated yet, someone standing on the outside of this symbolic temple of knowledge, waiting to come in.
Before a candidate can even think about knocking on that temple door, he first has to go through this really profound moment of isolation. He enters a place called the Chamber of Reflection, and it's designed for one purpose, a symbolic death of your old self so a new one can be born.
I mean, just try to imagine this for a second. You're alone, in the dark, your connection to the outside world, your money, your status, your jewelry, it's all taken away. You're blindfolded, you're made vulnerable, and there's a rope around your neck. This is way more than just getting ready. It's a process designed to completely disorient you, to detach you from everything you thought you were.
And none of this is just for show. The manual is super clear about what it all means. That blindfold, it's not just about not seeing. It represents a state of total ignorance. Taking away the medals, that's to show that your wealth and your social status mean absolutely nothing on this journey. And the rope, well, that's a really powerful symbol for all the biases, the prejudices, and the pressures from society that kind of enslave our minds and keep us from thinking freely. So, here you are, alone in this dark room, and then comes the first real test. You're asked to think about your own mortality and write your philosophical last will and testament. You have to really dig deep and define your core duties and beliefs. It's this moment of intense introspection, forcing you to decide what truly matters before your journey can even get started. So, after confronting his inner world, the candidate is now led into the lodge itself, still blindfolded by the way. And in here, he's going to face a series of symbolic trials by the classic elements: air, water, and fire. Each one represents a fundamental part of the human experience that you have to master.
The first journey is all about chaos. The candidate is led through the room, but his path is full of obstacles he keeps stumbling over. And all around him, he's hearing these loud noises, the clash of swords. It's meant to be totally disorienting and confusing, just like a life lived without any real direction or purpose.
So what's the point of all that chaos? Well, the meaning is actually pretty deep. That confusing journey symbolizes youth. You know, that time when we're all just stumbling through life, kind of powerless against all the world's misinformation and manipulations. At least until a guiding hand helps us find our way. This first trial is the trial of air.
After the trial of air, he moves on. Next up is purification by water, where his hand is literally plunged into it. This symbolizes washing away all the past impurities, cleansing the soul. And then he's brought near a flame, a powerful symbol of the passions that can consume us, but also the purifying fire that forges a stronger, more resilient character.
So, he's made it through the symbolic trials, he's been purified, but there's one final, absolutely crucial step he has to take, all while still in complete darkness. He has to make a solemn pledge, an oath that will bind him to the fraternity and its principles forever. And this is probably the most famous and definitely the most misunderstood part of the whole ceremony. In total darkness, with his hand on a sacred text, the candidate swears to never ever reveal the secrets of the fraternity. Now, the penalty he mentions is symbolic, of course, but the gruesome language is there for a reason, to impress upon him the absolute gravity and seriousness of the promise he's making.
So, once that oath is taken, the most dramatic moment of the entire ritual is here. Everything he's gone through, the isolation, the trials, that intense pledge in the darkness, it has all been leading up to this one single pivotal moment of transition.
So, after all of that, what's the payoff? What does he get in return for this difficult journey and his solemn vow of secrecy?
The light. In a single instant, his blindfold is ripped off, and for the very first time he sees the lodge, all of its symbols, and all the members standing in a circle around him, with their swords drawn and pointed right at him. But it's not a threat. It's a sign that they will now defend him as their new brother. This moment is all about that transition from ignorance to enlightenment.
So just like that, he's no longer an outsider. He's an apprentice Mason. But here's the thing. The real work has just begun. To help him in this lifelong task of self-improvement, he's presented with his first set of symbolic working tools, and each one has a lesson to teach. He gets a hammer, or a gavel, which represents the force of his will, but a will that must be guided by reason and intelligence. He gets a chisel, and that's for chipping away at the imperfections of his own character, that rough stone we talked about. And finally, the 24-inch rule, which symbolizes the need to divide his day properly. Time for work, time for rest, and time for serving others. These aren't tools for building a house, they're for building a better life.
You see, that whole initiation ritual, as intense and dramatic as it is, well, it's really just the beginning. What comes next is a lifelong commitment to a whole philosophy, a code of conduct that's governed by some very specific, unchangeable principles.
These principles are called landmarks, and you can think of them as the unbreakable constitution of Freemasonry. They're the core operating system, making sure that key beliefs, like the 3 degrees, a belief in a higher power they call the Great Architect, the absolute equality of all members, and of course, secrecy, all remain constant no matter where you are or what year it is.
Okay, but how does all this high-level symbolic stuff actually translate to your day-to-day life? Well, the manual is very clear about that too. It provides a set of pretty straightforward ethical commandments. Be just, forgive people, show respect to everyone, especially the vulnerable. This is where all that allegory and ritual becomes a practical guide for how to live a good, virtuous life.
And this all brings us back around to a final, really thought-provoking question. The entire ritual is built on this metaphor of working on yourself, like a stonemason shaping a rough block of stone. So if that stone is our own character, full of all the flaws and imperfections we discover throughout our lives, it begs the ultimate question: can this work ever really be complete? Maybe the real secret of Freemasonry isn't some handshake or a password. Maybe it's the simple understanding that the most important work any of us can ever do is the work on ourselves, and that work is never, ever finished.